Hi, and welcome to another episode of Boozing with Boomers. I'm Dave, and I've been on a quest to learn how to make a great balanced cocktail, so please hit the subscribe button so we can go on this journey together. Today we're going to make the Creole Cocktail, the name of which dates back to 1913, but the cocktail recipe we work with today is drawn from the 1930s cocktail book, the Savoy Cocktail Book. In my research, though, I noticed there are several variations from this recipe that are being used today. So I decided to use Chris Hannah's version. And if you remember, Chris worked at French 75 in New Orleans and created the Boo Radley that I made in episode 37. He said he modeled that drink after the Creole Cocktail, so I thought he would be the best source for today's recipe. It's called the Creole Cocktail for simply the fact that it was created in New Orleans. And what's interesting about this cocktail I found out is it's a variation on the Brooklyn, which also used Amer Picon, which was the stiff competitor to the Manhattan before Prohibition. So before Prohibition, there were two main cocktails vying for New York City's admiration, and they were the Manhattan and the Brooklyn. The problem with the Brooklyn was after Prohibition, they stopped making or stopped exporting Amer Picon to the United States. And that was the big challenge that I had in making this cocktail today. However, luckily, I happen to have a bottle so I can make the original recipe, and I'd like to give a shout out to Jim, who was nice enough to bring a bottle back from Europe so that I could have the proper recipe to teach you about the Creole cocktail. Now, when you're out there looking for these ingredients, I had read, and I'll probably put a couple other notes in the description, but that there's an Amaro called Ramazzotti. It's got a bright red label. It's similar to a Verna that I've used in a lot of cocktails, but I think it's just a little bit different. It maybe has a little more bitters similar to the Amer Picon. So if you pick up a bottle of that, you can get pretty close to the original recipe as well. So let's get started. The other interesting thing about this cocktail is it's all booze. And I'm gonna use the exact recipe that Chris Hannah used at French 75. And it includes Punt. Now, Punt is what's called a vermouth di Torino, so it's a little more bitter than a typical sweet vermouth. Rittenhouse rye, which is a great staple for a rye cocktail. Benedictine. Now, Benedictine is also an herbal liqueur, but this one kind of has almost like a honey sweetness to it. And then last but not least, Amer Picon, which is a French Amer, and it too is a bitter as well. So we're really going to be mixing three different bitters to complement the rye whiskey. And so my expectation was that this is kind of a dry cocktail, but still very tasty and interesting. So let's get started. The first thing we also learned, the thing we've learned along the way is you should start with your least ingredients first, and that's also what's an interesting dynamic here, is your vermouth usually of all the liquors that you're going to use is going to be the least expensive. So I will have half an ounce of Punt. Then my second least expensive is the Rittenhouse rye, and we're going to have 1.5 ounces of rye per cocktail, but of course I'm making 2 today. Then we're going to go with 1 ounce of Benedictine. I'm sorry, half an ounce of Benedictine. So it's half an ounce of Punt, 1.5 of rye, half an ounce of Benedictine, and half an ounce of Amer Picon. Now I'm using that last because I don't know price-wise if it is more expensive than Dom, but I know if I include travel costs to get another bottle of this, it is. So I will always save that for last in case I make a mistake. This is a stirred cocktail. So we'll make sure to have plenty of ice. And try not to throw it all over the place. And then we will stir it for 20 seconds. What's really interesting is in the recipe I found from Chris Hannah, he said to stir it exactly 57 times. So I'm going to stir it 57 times so I can understand how long that is. So I'll be right back. $57. Then make your drink here. Oops. And then, of course, we need some for the boomer. It's very important for the bartender to always make sure the cocktail tastes as good for themselves as for the guests. And then we're just going to do a simple lemon twist. So unlike when you have a lemon peel, this is much harder. You can't really squeeze as much to get the oils to come off the lemon. So it really is made to be in the drink. And what I have not perfected, this is where you know I'm an amateur bartender, not a professional, is actually how to do this so the curl stays. But let's just rest it on the edge there. And I will do the same for mine. And I'll just stir it a little bit since I won't be letting it sit there as long. So let's see how I did. Yeah, so it's really interesting. I would definitely call this a dry cocktail. Not much drier than a Manhattan, but I get the bitterness all the way through, but it also comes across with many different layers. So I kind of get the honeyness that comes out of this. What's nice about Rittenhouse rye, it is a higher proof rye, so you're getting the rye flavor actually is melding with all the other flavors. So what I really get with this is I'm getting every single bitter element kind of coming through, but not overpowering. So it's not too dry. You got the honey in here. You got a little bit of orange kind of coming out of here, and a little bit more of the, I think, the cherry red or the red berry coming out from a sweet vermouth, but all with their own level of bitterness that marries really well. So I hope you liked today's episode. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe so we can go on this journey. Go on the journey of boozing with boomers together. Thank you and cheers.